Bouquet. Author prefers to remain anonymous. 37 stairs led onto the top of the temple. Clad in a white hooded robe, the spear scaled them one by one. She moved in a slow, deliberate manner, not only because such was a must for the ritual she was about to complete. Rather, she was reluctant to complete it at all. Reluctant to commit a deed cruel, yet necessary. Maybe she would feel better if that one person was by her side as promised. The rules and protocols required her to enter the temple alone. There could be no witnesses to the harvest. Still, the one she considered her spiritual mate promised her to be there to lend her strength so she would not cower at the last moment. For Goddess's will was not easy to abide. Deep from the past came her grudge towards people, grudge that required the harvest to take place every 70 years. Should it not happen, F4A would wipe out entire natural life, eventually leading to the demise of humans. In the core of this hatred laid, as relayed by ancient text, a broken heart. The spear entered the temple, and when the wooden doors closed behind her, she slipped the hood off her head. Honey-coloured hair spilled in a cascade over her shoulders, its soft waves framing her unexpectedly calm face. Crimson eyes, the sign from F4A marking her as the spear, opened wider as the woman tried to become accustomed to the semi-darkness filling the sacred room. Then she took a lingering look around, hoping for the familiar presence to reveal itself. She could almost hear the husky voice bragging how easy it was to slip past the guards and into the temple. But it bragged only in her mind. The temple was empty, bar the spear herself and the few that lined her way to the inner sanctuary. In times when gods often trod among mortals, the same was true for F4A, the guardian goddess of the Altea country. She visited her believers in different forms, but most often as a young, beautiful maiden. A maiden so lovely, in fact, that all it took was to bat her long eyelashes, and men were ready to do any and everything she asked of them. F4A took great delight in their worship, blessing the lands ever so generously. But even Goddess wasn't immune to simple infatuation. She fell in love with a young lad whose unruly black hair made him look feral. At first, it seemed the feeling was mutual, and the two of them spent numerous lovely moments together. But it so happened one evening that they were attacked by a band of masked men while taking a stroll by the river. F4A turned to her lover for help, doing it purely by some feminine instinct, because she could easily dispose of attackers on her own. But he was gone. The one she put her trust in betrayed her, valuing his hide more than her safety. After the first shock faded, the goddess let herself be consumed by anger. She denied people her blessings, destroying plants and animals, first around her temple, but slowly reaching further. When her terrified believers begged F4A for mercy, she demanded from them a sacrifice of 12 girls, chosen according to several conditions. Aside from meeting a number of other requirements, the girls had to be untouched in every imaginable aspect of the word. The spear closed the distance to the first girl on her path to the inner sanctuary. All sacrifices were clothed in robes not unlike her own, but dyed with different colourings. With hands a little unsteady, she pushed the hood back, revealing the scared face of a girl at the beginning of her adolescence. So young, younger even than the spear. Caressing a heated cheek with one hand, she reached with the other between the folds of her robe. Slowly, she closed her fingers on a small bottle of cool liquid that would soon be used to complete the sacrifice. With a steadiness coming from numerous hours of practice during her 7-month-long training before the ritual, she unplugged the vial and brought it to her lips. A familiar sting spread over her lips as they were moistened by the concoction. The spear tipped the bottle further, allowing the cool liquid to roll down her tongue while she counted falling drops. Enough. She pocketed the vial and took a deep breath. This was it. She couldn't wait any longer for her mate. Picked at the spring of your life, when you bloom the fullest, chanted the spear, first part of the sacrificial phrase. I forever rest at my goddess's feet, came the answer, quiet and unsteady. Holding the girl with incredible gentleness, the spear dipped her over her left arm, using her right hand to catch her chin. May she welcome you with open arms, she whispered, capturing the girl's lips in a kiss. She caressed them for a moment before she let her tongue slip past the barrier. The one in her arms slackened. The poisonous concoction was already working. The first kiss in the girl's life became her last one as well. With a heavy sigh, the spear laid her down upon the bed of silk pillows and looked at the others, still waiting for her kiss of death. The spear. How appropriate a name for the one piercing young lives and laying them down by the goddess's altar. Damned be the harvest, this wicked ritual that forced one innocent soul to take 12 others, innocent just as much. Damned be her crimson eyes and hair like wheat and all the other signs that marked her as father's chosen one. Damned be the one that promised to stay by her side and never kept her promise. They knew each other since forever, sharing milk bottle first, bowl of porridge later, a draught or two of mead in the last weeks. They grew together, ate together, played and studied and worked together. Together they slept as well, and, although her companion seemed completely satisfied with that, ever since they hit puberty the spear wanted something more. Or maybe she'd wanted it even before that, but without the realization? Still, she wouldn't say a word and satisfied herself with these scraps of attention that she was given for fear that should she demand more, her spiritual mate would be disgusted and leave her altogether. While same-sex relationships were not stigmatized, they were not condoned either. It was even a bit of a wonder that no one protested when she was recognized as the first female spear in history. And her precious one? They never really talked of how she felt about such couples. She was afraid that at the mention of this subject, distaste and repulsion would come to dwell in the usually compassionate emerald eyes. Maybe she had learned of the spear's desires. Or maybe she was so disgusted by the very thought of watching 2 women kiss during the harvest that she went back on her promise. But then, why promise in the first place? Shaking these questions away, the spear took a step forward, reaching the second girl. She desperately clung to all her beliefs and teachings as the hood revealed yet another childlike face. The vial and the familiar sting of cool liquid, the hastily chanted words of the ritual, and the kiss. She all but rushed through the sacrifices, eventually resolving to moistening her lips before taking their hoods off. This way she had to look into their eyes, sometimes serene, sometimes resentful, only for the short moment of chanting the sacred phrases. Finally, the last one. Closing her eyes with relief, the spear pushed the hood off the girl's head and chanted, "Picked at the spring of your life when you bloom the fullest. I will forever rest at my goddess's feet." At the sound of the husky tone of a voice so familiar, so dear to her heart, her eyes shot wide open. Suddenly speechless, she shook her head vehemently in denial to what she saw. "May she welcome you with open arms." When she still couldn't find her voice, the girl explained, "That's what you're supposed to say now." "Nuli, why, what are you doing here?" "I promised I would be with you during the harvest. Did I not, Shalia?" But I never thought it would be like this. The spear took a deep breath, and then another one to still her racing heart. How could this have happened? Nuli's smile held a hint of sadness as she looked away before answering, her voice quiet but steady. "They tasked me with gathering girls for the harvest. I found quite a few eligible, but when I talked to them, some of them were prepared for this since their childhood by their devout parents. Others were more than a little surprised, but they thought it righteous to lay their lives down for this cause. There were even some for whom this fate seemed better than the lives they lived." The girl sighed and shook her head. "But most of them were stupefied. They almost begged me, almost because you shouldn't say no when Father asks for you, to let them be, to overlook them in my search. So, in the end, there was 11 of them, and me." Once again she looked at the girls laying along the aisle. A rueful chuckle escaped her lips, and she reached for Shalia's hand. "I knew you'd make a great spear. Just look what a beautiful sacrifice you've made for the goddess." "I won't pierce you." Shalia gathered her spiritual mate in her arms, and relief washed over her when her hug was returned. "Father can take anyone but you, and I don't care." At Nuli's attempt at interruption, her speech quickened. "If you fit any bloody requirement of hers... Actually..." Suddenly, she was struck with an idea. "I can make it so that you won't qualify for a sacrifice. I'll do it with real pleasure." She reached for the hem of Nuli's robe, pushing her hand underneath, letting it grab at slim legs, but the girl only pulled her closer. "You won't do it, Shalia." As the low whisper sounded in her ear, the spear shut her eyes and swallowed hard, knowing the truth in these words. "Because you care too much, and because you know, once you've entered the temple, you cannot leave until the harvest is finished, lest it has to be fully redone." One last desperate idea. "Then let me..." Soft hands kept stroking her back, as if to lessen the blow. "You are the spear, chosen by Father herself. I could never sacrifice you." Nuli pulled from her to look her in the eye. "I'd rather it be you than anyone else." Shalia cringed and blinked back tears. How could she live after this, after killing the one so close to her heart? Soon all thoughts vanished from her head as something soft touched her lips. This softness was tentative in its movements, tempting and pulling away almost immediately. The spear eagerly accepted its unspoken invitation, prying the softness open, exploring its warmth, getting drunk with rich and heady sensations she found within. Until a quiet gasp brought her back to her senses, until a limp body weighed down on her arms. Desperately, she tried to understand what had just transpired. Newly was kissing her and... Newly was kissing her. Wide-eyed, the spear witnessed Newly mouthing her last "thank you" before her lips froze in a delicate smile. She fell to her knees, screaming her refusal to accept this death. With shaking hands, she swept raven hair from the pale face, caressing it, willing it with all her might to come back to life. Only after all her efforts come to naught did she whisper, "May she welcome you with open arms." Gathering the lifeless body of her precious one into her arms, the spear raised her face towards the ceiling, towards the heavens where supposedly the goddess dwelt. Tears streamed down her face, yet she kept her silence, unsure what word would come out of her lips. Would it be a wish that Nuli's sacrifice wasn't in vain, or would she rather curse the merciless goddess for depriving her of the one person she held dear? As if clouds split apart on a gloomy day and sun peeked through them, Shalia found herself bathed in soft, warm light. And then she heard a voice, not coming from anywhere, but resounding deep within her. "Why are you sad, my graceful spear? You've arranged such a wonderful bouquet for me, and this lily in your arms, what splendid company she'll make." Shalia shook her head in confusion. What bouquet? What lily? It was Father's voice that rang in her, of this she had no doubt, but what was she to make of the goddess's words? "I am no artist. You made me your spear so that your broken heart would be appeased with the girls slain at their youth." She focused her attention back on Newly, only now realizing that the girl's dress was white as a lily. Father's presence left her for just a little while, and then Shalia felt some conscience tugging gently at her innermost thoughts. At first, she shuddered at this intrusion, but when the inspection was over, she felt unexpectedly bereft. Once again, she heard Father's voice within herself. This time, though, it sounded rather severe. "You brought me an abundant harvest, young spear, and for this you deserve a reward. I can bring you to where your loved one will dwell from now on. I can grant you an eternity together." Shalia didn't need much time to consider the goddess's offer. After all, she was Nuli's only family. While I am grateful for your kindness, this last word barely squeezed through her throat, I have to decline such a generosity. Without me, the memory of Nuli will soon be gone, and what she'd done, who she was, it cannot be forgotten. I will not allow it to be forgotten. And what will you say to your kinsman? Will you speak of your righteous anger towards the goddess who deprived you of whom you loved the most? Melancholy smile gracing her lips, the spear caressed Nuli's face. I will not waste my breath for that. I will rather speak of her kindness and beauty, of what a wonderful friend she was to me, of all the things that she taught me. Suddenly, a giggle bubbled inside Shalia, and once again she heard the goddess, her voice much like the first time, soft and tender. Then see and learn. In the times when gods often trod among mortals, it so happened that the guardian god of the Altea country shirked his station. The region was gradually falling into decay, plants and animals dying, first around the abandoned temple, but then further and further. One day, a fair maiden wandered into the temple, only to learn that the irresponsible defector left behind a curse, making the first person to step past the shrine's threshold the new guardian god. Farah shouldered her new role with all the courage her teenage heart could muster. Having learned of her fate, a few girls decided to keep her company in her unrewarding watch over the region. The 12 of them were put, by means of a herbal concoction, to death resembling sleep that freed their spirits from the bodies. Dressed in colourful robes, they lay in the temple as a lush bouquet offered to the Divine One. The girls lived with the goddess in their spiritual form until their time came. Farah's fate was still remembered by some people, so they found other girls to attend upon her. Somewhere, during the years that followed, the ceremony of sending 12 girls into a peaceful existence by the goddess's side became treated as a mass sacrifice, the girls no longer part of a bouquet, but a sacrifice pierced in their prime by a cruel spear. The pain that Shalia felt as she learned of the real story was twofold. It was the pain of Farah's loneliness and the pain of the goddess's learning how people twisted what was once a willing sacrifice. On the brink of tears, she felt a soft hand gently stroking her back, and she heard, for the last time, the voice that resounded deep within her. Now go, my florist, and, if you will, bring me a bouquet once in a while. The voice was gone. The light faded, and Shalia found herself back in the temple. Nothing changed. Nuli was lying dead, and so were the other girls. Bracing herself to face the world, the spear pulled her hood on and swaggered towards the door. She pushed them open and squinted at the blinding sun. When she finally could open her eyes, she was astounded by what she saw. The greenery that had always barely reached the temple yard now overgrew it completely. Even the temple itself, its stone stairs and pillars, were covered in luscious flora. Murmurs and rustles came from behind Shalia's back, and soon she felt somebody crowding behind her to catch a glimpse of this wonder. The girls! The sacrifices! Alive and in perfect health! 1, 2, 3, 10, 11. Only 11. The 12th one was still lying at the threshold of the inner sanctuary. Pushing through the excitedly chatting girls, Shirley slowly walked to the unmoving form of her most dear one. She knelt by her and pushed the hood off her head to take one last look at the lovely face. A hood? Hadn't she taken it off before the amused sparkle in the emerald green eyes was soon accompanied by a low laughter. Charlia turned away and involuntarily pouted at this untimely joke. Soon there were gentle hands touching her face and shy lips seeking hers and meeting them in a clumsy kiss. "Newly," she admonished half-heartedly, too delighted to question the girl about her caress. "The goddess is watching." "Let's make her jealous then."